From the moment the Washington Post revealed there had been a secret hour-long meeting between President Trump and Vladimir Putin at the G20 summit, some news outlets portrayed the session as mysterious, questionable, and potentially sinister.
Now you're going to go off and have a separate meeting. We should know. The United States has been compromised by Vladimir Putin. This president appears to have been compromised by Vladimir Putin.
What is so nefarious about it that he's not able to have a normal conversation with other people that are attending this?
Because of what Donald Trump has done in the past, reporters, foreign policy analysts, and our allies can safely assume the worst.
I mean, here's a guy sitting next to Trump for an hour who screwed with our electoral process, who tried to influence the campaign in Trump's direction. Now we found a little ingenue going on between these two gentlemen, and we don't even know anything about it.
We don't even know what they were talking about. Molly Hemingway, what do you make of that?
Well, this was a great example of the media overpromising and underachieving. So the way that this story was presented was that this was incredibly nefarious, that it was secret, that it was something very problematic that people should be concerned about. And then when the truth came out, it turned out there was just a dinner gathering of all the G20 leaders and their spouses, and that there was a chat afterwards like anybody else might have.
Putin was sitting next to Melania, and it didn't last an hour, less than 15 minutes. I mean, the original story was fine, but then everybody on cable was like, this is really deeply troubling, breaking news banners everywhere.
And it lacks context. I mean, in the media right now, we're just in the full throes of a Red Scare. People should remember that this country is an adversary. We do know that they meddled or attempted to meddle in, by hacking the DNC emails and getting John Podesta to click on a link he shouldn't have. But at the same time, this is a nuclear superpower. This is the only country in the world that can annihilate ours in 30 minutes. We need to be cautious about them, but we also need to have good relations with them.
Now, President Trump told the New York Times in that interview that the subject of adoptions came up. Adoptions is sort of shorthand for U.S. sanctions against Moscow that led Putin to end an adoption program with America. So it wasn't all small talk, but I'm just so struck by there's just an automatic almost presumption of bad faith, like they were discussing something that, was so terrible and there was no U.S. translator there, and just like the president just doesn't get the benefit of the doubt that maybe he was just trying to establish more of a relationship with the leader of Russia.
Right, and they do have, we have sanctions and they have their retaliation against that. At the same time, I feel like the media haven't done a good job of presenting the overall picture with regard to Russia. You have, in the Trump administration, you've seen us increase liquid natural gas exports, which is something Russia really doesn't like. We're putting missile defense in Poland, which is something Russia really doesn't like. We attacked Syria when they used chemical weapons, which is something Russia really didn't like. And so when you pretend that there's all this stuff going on, that there's something really bad here about this relationship, you need to put it in context of the actual policies that are happening, and to point out also how different that is from the previous 8 years, which was friendlier by that standard.
And speaking of that, President Obama spoke privately with Putin and with Medvedev, and there was no U.S. translator, and just people thought that was diplomacy, right? But do you think this is another instance of journalists getting super excited, pundits on TV wringing their hands, and maybe this doesn't really resonate with a lot of voters, particularly Trump supporters?
Right. When you think about the actual amount of media coverage spent on Russia scare stories, and again, frequently how often they're overhyped relative to what's actually happening.
Not all the time. Yeah.
Almost always they're overhyped. And you have the actual interest from news consumers. It's a stark disparity. And you've seen some polls coming out showing that people aren't that interested in Russia. And even some journalists themselves are saying they have fatigue about Russia. And the danger here is, there was something that came out a couple weeks ago about the email between Don Jr. and whatnot. That, that's a legitimate thing to cover. But by the time you've had 6 months of stories that all fall apart, you're not interested in it.
We all get desensitized. Molly Hemingway, great to see you. Thanks for coming by this Sunday.